we go! Here we go! Here we go!
We're gonna have a fiery Sterling today.
Well, no, you just have a big old air horn, and anytime a Packers fan tries to talk, you just hit the button and drown them out. Like, no, I can't hear you. Go Bears.
It's basically the la 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 la.
Yeah, exactly. Right? You don't even have to live there. You can do it from here. Just remote control everything. Yeah, I'm pissed off, man. Fuck the NFL at this point.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the 1IQ Football Talk podcast. Brendan and Sterling, my friend, how you doing this week?
Oh, doing good. I mean, we're into January. We're into playoff football. The season's almost over, so that's a little bit depressing. It's colder than fucking anything outside again. So, oh, it's good otherwise. I've been off work for the week, so just been doing a lot of vegging, playing video games. You know how I do. How about yourself, buddy?
Yeah, after last weekend where I was a busy man, kind of just hung out this weekend, relax, was able to kind of do that. But yeah, it's January football, love playoff football, hate that I don't get to see my team in playoff football, but yep, we all kind of knew that was happening pretty much after week 6. And yep, Steelers not necessarily having the great game, but I don't think anyone was shocked by that result in any stretch of the imagination. And we're starting to see a lot more of the media, especially after that game, kind of talk about from that moment of going, is it time for the Steelers to maybe make a change? And then there was a few people going like, no, why would the Steelers ever make a change? And I've been kind of just sitting back going, you and I have been having this debate for the last 2 years, and it kind of feels like now everyone is just starting to come up to this conversation basically from the thing that you and I have been talking about the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. And essentially, if you're new and you're not necessarily sure what the conversation has been, it's essentially the Steelers have just been stuck in this limbo era of just being a really good regular season team, but then just falling apart in the playoffs. And this year marks 8 years in a row of where they have not been able to advance into the playoffs. And the way that the Steelers ended this year was essentially 5-game losing streak. And I've heard so many Steelers fans just on the internet talking about how difficult it was to watch a 5-game losing streak. And meanwhile, I'm sitting here going, try 12. And it's one of those things we talked about at the exact start of the year, where it was this team's going to be phenomenal and they were going to be unbelievable throughout the regular season just to fall apart in the playoffs. And ultimately, the argument that I've always made was it feels like the Steelers have just been kind of directionless these last few years. Again, once you lose your Hall of Fame quarterback in Ben Roethlisberger, it's not easy to replace that immediately. Not everyone can be as lucky as the Green Bay Packers, but like these last few years, it really has felt like the Steelers have been directionless. And I'm pretty sure I sent you a meme this week of where it was the Steelers with Russell Wilson, with Justin Fields, with unknown signed quarterback, with drafted quarterback. It's all going to be 10-5 or 10-6 or 10-7. Week 1 playoff defeat.
Yeah. I mean, what it's ultimately been, like what I've been seeing is we always talk about a team and their identity. Who are they? What are they? And honestly, this Steelers team has been lacking in identity for the last probably 7 to 10 years. And what happens is we get into the season every year without having that, and Mike Tomlin basically just imposes his will and his identity on it and goes, the standard is the standard. That is our identity again, because nothing else is stepping up. And this all, for me, really started when the team started looking for Ben Roethlisberger's replacement. Before he had even retired, after he signed that final contract that was, Everybody sort of knew it was going to be his final contract. He was in his early 30s at that time. And the team was like, okay, we're going to draft your replacement. And Ben Roethlisberger pushed back and did not like that. And that caused a rift in the locker room, a rift with management, a rift with ownership. And this team has never found its footing again since. And that really, for me, I feel like is the catalyst, because Ben Roethlisberger separated himself from continuing that Steelers culture and that Steelers identity that had been around since the 1960s. And he went, okay, well, if you guys are giving up on me and bringing somebody else in, without thinking for some reason that, hey, you know, I'm not going to do this forever. We need somebody to take up the reins when I do retire, you know, and it caused this issue, and the team has never found its identity again, and has never seemed to seek out a new identity other than Mike Tomlin just going, well, nobody wants to do it, I'll do it myself, and the standard is the standard. Will ourselves to a 9-8 season, a 10-7 season. We'll make the playoffs. Everybody will be high on us, and then we'll just play like it's week 3, even though it's wild card weekend.
Yeah, and this is where I hear so many fan bases talk about, and for someone who's been a fan of the Chicago Bears, which has just been a directionless team for years and years and years and years, and it's been one of those things of going like, you don't have your identity, you don't have this, you don't have that, and it's someone who's looked at the outside and been like, as an outside observer, and going, this is what these successful teams are doing, why aren't we following this model that has so clearly worked? Because we look at the Chiefs, for instance, even when they got Andy Reid and they had Alex Smith for a few years, it was okay, the Chiefs are a better team and they're able to improve, but what were the things that they ultimately did to improve this team? Well, they got a genius offensive minded head coach. They were able to bring in a quarterback that was talented. Now, they needed to draft a generational greatest quarterback that we've ever seen type player to get to that point, but it's one of those things of going, this is what we need to do. We need to stop trying to go with these random coaches, these CEO style guys of going like, oh yes, I know I'm on the defensive side, but I'm a CEO style guy. I bring in my coordinators and they do the work, and going, okay, that's great. Like, because that was the standard for years and years and years. And we saw it work with so many coaches, but nowadays it's going, well, the importance of the quarterback position, especially over these last 10 years, it's been, if you can't develop these young guys, especially on these rookie deals, then it's just going to be this constant merry-go-round of just constant clusterfuckery. And the biggest reason for that just merry-go-round of just why quarterbacks aren't working is because they're having to change so many things year after year after year. We talk about Mahomes and how he sat for a year and he got to learn behind Alex Smith. I still think the biggest reason why that worked out for the Chiefs was because it was Andy Reid's offense going, listen, kid, I'm not going anywhere. You are basically just going to sit back, you are going to study, and you are going to practice this for a year, and you basically get like a doctorates on my offense, and then you're going to immediately come out, and he casually just threw for 50 touchdowns, and I think it was over 5,000 passing yards in his rookie season, essentially. And then from then on, yeah, Andy Reid changes his offense year to year. You can't have the exact same offense, but 80% of that playbook is the exact same, and it's just kind of taking stuff that doesn't work anymore and scrapping that and moving it out and just continuing that offense. So you're not having to change everything year to year. And as a Bears fan who went through the Lovie Smith era where there was a new offensive coordinator every other year, and you watch Jay Cutler have 6 offensive coordinators and play callers in his, I think it was 9 seasons that he was the Bears quarterback. And then you watched Trubisky go from John Fox to Matt Nagy, who literally would not change his offense for anyone. He was going, if you don't run this, you can't do it. And then it was, okay, we're bringing in Justin Fields. And he got fired. And then Justin Fields had to deal with a coach being fired, new offense. That one didn't really work out. Caleb Williams comes in. He's already had this. And even if you're not having the firing situation where it's like, I look at D'Amico Ryans, for instance, and going, he got really lucky that his offensive coordinator stayed that year, because we're kind of looking at it going like, oh, like, what is CJ Stroud going to look like when they have to find a new offensive coordinator to come in and be that head coach? I'm really interested to see what Dan Quinn's going to do when Cliff Kingsbury ultimately gets another head coaching job, because we've already seen Dan Quinn, when he had a very, very high level head coach that was on the offensive side of the ball leave to become a head coach, team sucked. Like, his culture sucked, and it was like, oh, we're going to fire Dan Quinn 2 years after he made it to the Super Bowl. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's because it was Kyle Shanahan. And to me, that's just one of those things where it's just, if you're constantly having that merry-go-round, it's just a result of failure.
Well, and I mean that's the tough thing right now too, is like, unless you can get one of those top tier offensive head coaches, then you're going to be stuck in that limbo, because you can get a mediocre offensive head coach and he's not going to get you anywhere because he's not one of these geniuses. You can go with the Tomlin, the Vrabels, who are more defensive minded, but then if you get a good OC, he's going to get a head coaching job. And that's the tough thing, is with the where the league is now, you need that head coach who has his own playbook, his own play style, so that, like you said, Andy Reid changes his playbook every year, but they change it together with Patrick Mahomes now, because they're already a unit, so they change everything together, and it's not learning a new playbook, it's creating a new playbook together. Whereas you bring in a new head coach and the quarterback has to learn a new playbook. Same with OC, like whatever it ends up being. And I mean, that's the hell that the Pittsburgh Steelers are kind of stuck in right now. We've seen it. You cannot build a team in this league in one off season. It doesn't happen. And the Steelers right now, because of where they're at with their head coaching, I don't see them moving on from it, unfortunately, unless a guy like Ben Johnson or Kyle Shanahan or Mike McDaniels like falls into their lap. That's the only way I really see them moving on. So you're stuck with Mike Tomlin in a way, which, don't get me wrong, that's not a bad thing. He is still a phenomenal head coach, but he cannot develop other coaches. He cannot develop a quarterback. So we're going to run into the issue of, okay, can Arthur Smith do that? I don't think he can. So we go out and get another offensive coordinator, maybe somebody from college who already knows whatever quarterback we happen to draft, if that's what the Steelers decide to do. And so then that is the option that they're going with. And it works out for a year or two, and that OC then starts getting head coaching offers. He goes elsewhere, and this team goes right back into that limbo. And so that is the issue that Pittsburgh's at right now, is they've got such a good defense and so much money invested in it that they don't want to squander it. So we see them not addressing the true issue of not having an identity, not having the proper coaching in place to elevate in this league, and we see them just treading water, going, let's grab this quarterback. Okay, that didn't work. Let's grab this quarterback, because that's all they see, is they see the hole that Ben Roethlisberger left, and they're like, we can fill all the other spots with nobodies, but we need the all-star in the quarterback role. So they tried Trubisky, they tried to overdraft Kenny Pickett, they tried Russell Wilson, they tried Justin Fields. None of it's working, but they're going to just do the same thing next year.
Yeah.
They are. Yeah. They've got so many contracts up this season that they're going to have to, because they have to re-sign so many key members of that defense that they're going to have to commit that money there. They're not going to be able to go out and steal some quarterback away from somewhere. So it's going to be Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, probably one of those four. And if we're lucky, maybe they draft a quarterback in the second or third round that has some promise. But promise for what? Because there's nobody to develop him, and so that's the issue. That is almost what it looked like this year. It's like they brought in Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, and they're like, well, maybe Russ can develop Justin Fields for us. That's what it really felt like. Was Russell Wilson was a quarterback coach and a quarterback at the same time, and it was too much for him to handle.
What, and another rumor that I've heard this week is that Justin Fields doesn't want to re-sign with the Steelers because of Arthur Smith, where it's
Yeah.
basically been like, I don't want to play, like, I want to play with Pittsburgh, but they're not going to move on from Arthur Smith, who has not developed me and frankly didn't utilize me properly. And it was one of those things where when you and I had like an hour long just rage fest because when they decided to make the switch over from Russell Wilson or from Justin Fields to Russell Wilson, where we're like, okay, well, when we finally calmed down 2 weeks later, we're like, oh, you still utilize Justin Fields. Like he's like, don't just have it be like, oh, this is 3rd and 1. We're gonna bring in Justin Fields. What is he gonna do? And it's just Arthur Smith going, we're gonna run you up the middle because you're big, strong, and fast, and Russell Wilson is small, slow, and tiny.
Old.
Yeah. And it's, you could have it be a situation of where you have Justin Fields out there for a series where you look at it and go, Russ, we need to give a different look. We're not taking him out of the game. We're just trying to force them to have a different look. We're trying to get Najee Harris going a little bit more in this game. And if we have Justin out there, it can be a situation of where we're looking at it going like, oh, this is Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry Walmart edition, essentially, where it's big running back, big, strong, fast quarterback, and it's going, Justin Fields clearly shows that he can throw the ball. Is he as accurate as Russell Wilson? No, but it's, you still have a starting level quarterback that you basically just completely didn't use and utilize, and it showed. And whenever Justin Fields was out there, it was, well, we all know that he's gonna get the first down here, but like, you could definitely use him for other opportunities. And sometimes I see you kind of like shaking your head there. Sometimes it just straight up didn't work.
Well, no, because defenses knew it was coming. It's like, oh, it's 3rd and short. Justin Fields is out there. Okay, so he's either going to run it left or hand it to Najee Harris to go middle or right. So we don't even have to protect a pass defense. Just load the box and we stop both of them.
Yeah.
And that's what ended up happening. There were so many opportunities for Arthur Smith to utilize Justin Fields because you just bring him in a sub package as a running back. Even you put him in the backfield with Najee Harris, 2 running backs, Justin Fields, Najee Harris, Russell Wilson still there. You can pitch it to Justin Fields, who can then still pass it.
Yeah.
You know, like, you have these unique opportunities that Arthur Smith used none of. So I don't blame Justin Fields, because here's the thing: Justin Fields got to see, what, 4 weeks did he play of Arthur Smith?
He's 6. Like, he had
6
6
weeks
starts
of Arthur Smith's offense. So he got to play in it and see what it was like, and was like, great, I just pitched the ball 90% of the time. That's fun. Yay. You know, and the rest of the time I get to run with it and get hit. Like, so I don't blame him for not wanting to be in Arthur Smith's offense, because Arthur Smith's offense is designed for a big bruising running back. You need a guy that's going to run over the first one that hits him. And Najee Harris can do that sometimes. Not all the time. Not like Derrick Henry. That's just it. Arthur Smith is living in the past too. He remembers everything Derrick Henry did when he was the OC there, and was like, why can't any other running backs do that?
If it worked so
Because
well
Derrick
with Tennessee.
Henry is an anomaly.
Yeah.
He is a unique player that is
He's a unicorn.
one of a kind. You know, it's frustrating. So I don't blame Justin Fields in that. And if Arthur Smith is still there when it comes time to re-sign or test free agency, I fully expect Justin Fields to go sign somewhere else. And it would not shock me at all, because Arthur Smith, it's not working. And I don't know what the Steelers team is going to do offense-wise, because rumors are swirling that Najee Harris is out. He's not coming back. They're not re-signing him. George Pickens is out. They're not re-signing him. They're not bringing him back. And so there's going to be a big overhaul on offense. We don't know who wide receiver one's going to be. We don't know who running back one's going to be. We don't know who quarterback one's going to be. Our offensive line is stellar. You know, we've done really good job drafting there. But the issue is, we need a combination of coaching and quarterback that can make everything around them better. And until Omar Khan and the Steelers ownership are willing to address that situation, and it's going to be painful to address it, you're going to have to trade away TJ Watt or Alex Highsmith, or maybe both, Minka Fitzpatrick, Joey Porter Jr. One of these big key pieces, maybe two of them, you're going to have to move on from in order to start rebuilding this team properly. Because otherwise, you're going to tread water. You're going to win 9 or 10 games a year. You're going to keep losing playoff games until TJ Watt's career is over and you get nothing in return for it. And you go, okay, well, now we're going to hit the reset button with absolutely no wild cards in our hand.
Yeah, and this has been one of the biggest frustrating things, because I know people would assume, just from listening to us over these last 2 years, would say and would think, with all the criticisms that I've had against the Steelers, that I really dislike the Steelers organization. That could be nothing further from the truth. Like, I've always said, I think the Steelers are one of the best franchises in the NFL. They're basically the AFC equivalent of the Chicago Bears, just with a lot better luck. And
with the black magic.
Yeah, with the black magic, and in Mike Tomlin's case, literal black magic. But it's one of those things where, like, I want them to succeed. I want, like, again, you and I have always had this dream of watching the Bears versus the Steelers in a Super Bowl. Like, that is the main goal. And to watch both of our teams screw it up for one way or the other, where both of us were living in this world of mediocrity. The Bears are in the bad mediocre world, and the Steelers are in the good mediocre world. But unfortunately, both are mediocre. And
right.
It's this has been one of the biggest frustrating things about this Bears coaching cycle, where you're looking at it going like, oh, let's trade for Mike Tomlin. Let's go get him because he's such a leader. Like, look, he's never had a losing season. Like, he, even this year, with all of the scraps that he had to put together, he was still able to go 10-7. And you listen to people talk about Mike McCarthy and go, oh, in the 5 years that he was with Dallas, he had 12 win seasons 3 years in a row. When was the last time the Bears ever had that? I go, yeah, that's great. That is unbelievable. I love the sound of having 12 win seasons and constantly making the playoffs. But you know what I want? I want Super Bowls. I don't want the goal to just make the playoffs. Because if you just make the playoffs, and as someone who is a Detroit Red Wings fan, and I got spoiled for 25 years of consecutive playoffs, where I basically got to sit back and go, I know we're making the playoffs, it's sick. But there was a lot of years where it's going, I would kind of like a little bit more than just making the playoffs. I would like the chance to win a Stanley Cup, or in this case, in football, I would love the chance to go win a Super Bowl. The fact that we've had it just be such a roller coaster of up and down. It's kind of made too many people complacent with the idea of going, if we make the playoffs 3 years in a row, I'll just be happy. And I'm sitting back going like, no, you wouldn't. It sounds great on paper, but then when the Bears make it to the playoffs and they get bounced in the wild card round, you're going to be sitting back going, oh, this and that, like, we should have done this, and fire the coach, and then it's going to be the next year of going like, oh, we're 12-7, or we're 12-5 going into the playoffs. We're going to be unstoppable. Get bounced in the wild card rounds. It's just, this is the way that I've kind of come to rationalize it this week. It's basically, there's two mindsets. If you are a playoff caliber team, the goal should be Super Bowl. And if you don't win the Super Bowl, it's a failure of a season. Even if you make it to the Super Bowl, it's a failure if you don't win it. And it should be completely unacceptable by any stretch of the imagination. Now, there's the other side of where there's teams with no expectations that are fighting for the first spot. We look at the Broncos, for instance. This was a team this year that had zero expectations around them. We all thought they were going to be a 5-win team at most. And they went to the playoffs. Unfortunately for the Broncos now, the goal is no longer make the playoffs. It's we need to win a Super Bowl. They might have been a year ahead of schedule on that one, and it might come back to bite them in the ass. We're talking the same thing with the Texans. The Texans were 10-7 this year. Like, that is not by any stretch of the imagination a bad season. But the fact that we're talking about them the way that we are, where it's like, oh, they walked into the playoffs and every team's going to want to face them because they suck. It's like, because like they downgraded this year. Now, granted, they won their game and they're still in the hunt for the championship. And if they win this week, it's going to be like, okay, well, like the Texans. But if they don't win the Super Bowl this year, it's a failure. And this is why I just constantly sit back and go, man, it's just really hard watching, particularly fans in my fan base, be comfortable with the idea of mediocrity. When it's just been like, yeah, we've been bad and we've had this roller coaster of up and down, up and down. But it's like, Mike McCarthy's not that bad. It's like, guys, he's going to raise the standard and we might have a few years of just winning, but we're not winning the Super Bowl. Like, what's the goal? What is the goal? And
Yeah, I
everyone
mean,
says
it's
it's
a
Chiefs.
tough fine line to walk too, though, because, we don't want a league that's full of, two different types of teams. Like, yeah, we're going to win the Super Bowl. And then the other group is, yeah, we're just going to tank. We know we can't win the Super Bowl, so we want the first overall pick.
Oh, I'm not
'Cause
necessarily saying in like that
No,
realm. I'm
but that's the extreme that it goes towards,
Yeah.
unfortunately, is when that starts happening. And it's tough because every season you want to start off not believing your team is one of those mediocre teams.
Yep.
That's the way you need to start off. But unfortunately, a lot of times we see what our teams do in the offseason and we go, it'll be the same shit again this year. But there's nothing we can do about it because we know they're not going to try to lose. And it can be frustrating, and I'm settling in for it. I expect it to be probably a 5 to 10 year stretch before we actually see the Steelers be truly competitive, unless they strike gold and manage to grab some stellar quarterback that nobody expected. It's going to have to be out of left field where everybody's like, yeah, he's washed, or yeah, he's no good, and all of a sudden he comes and turns into Sam Darnold, but never goes back to seeing the ghosts. That sort of thing. They're going to have to catch lightning in a bottle for this to turn around quickly.
Yeah, and both of us here at the moment are in a tough place for both of our teams. For me, I would say I'm in a much darker place than you because I'm watching my team about to make one of the biggest mistakes that they could ever make by hiring Mike McCarthy.
Yeah.
And I've floated this idea around to you before. Like, I know when I said the Bears drafted Justin Fields, I said if the Bears somehow ruin Justin Fields, I'm out. I can't cheer for him anymore. And again, I don't think the Bears ruined Justin Fields. I just don't think he ever reached his full potential, just obviously from dumb stuff happening, but he was still capable. Like, if the Bears didn't have the number 1 pick, he was probably still going to be the Bears quarterback. Like, I fully get that. And with this, if they can't find a way to hire Ben Johnson or Todd Monken, one of those two guys, it's going to be a situation of where you're just looking at going, what are we doing? Like, there's people that are sitting back talking about hiring a guy like Brian Flores. I know we talked about it last week a little bit, where I just go, I don't know why that guy would ever be considered for a head coaching job ever again. And I come from it from the standpoint of, like, if you're going to be a team that needs to work with a quarterback, why in hell would you ever trust your team with Brian Flores with your quarterback for what he did with Tua? And then I see people talking about Aaron Glenn, where it's like, oh, Aaron Glenn is the most, he's like, even Ben Johnson said this week, he's like, Aaron Glenn is probably the most suited guy I've ever seen to become a head coach ever. I'm like, yeah, that's great. Who's his offensive coordinator? And then who's his offensive coordinator after that guy either succeeds and leaves or fails and doesn't? And I just constantly sit back and go, like, again, we've already went down that roller coaster of just, or that merry-go-round of just a constant, just, I go, like, why are we as a fan base comfortable with that idea? And like, I look at Ben Johnson on the same tier as Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay. The fact, like, I've tweeted this out, where it's the fact that Ben Johnson has developed Jared Goff better than Sean McVay should be the only conversation we should have about him as a candidate for the head coach. We talk about Sean McVay being one of the best offensive minds, and he developed Jared Goff into a good quarterback. Ben Johnson developed him into an elite quarterback, where it's like, we all basically said when Jared Goff went to Detroit, well, guess what, buddy? Your career's going down the toilet. Like, this is where you go to die. Like, the Rams got rid of you and they sent you to Detroit of all places. And like we talked about, where this is going to be a situation where after the end of the season, we're going to have to kind of relook at that trade and go, like, both teams definitely won this deal. But if Detroit wins the Super Bowl this year, we're going to be sitting back going like, well, maybe Detroit ultimately won that deal a little bit more because they got this, and this from that deal. Plus they were able to get Jared Goff for pennies on the dollar and be able to get him to this level. And then you look at Todd Monken, who's basically just turned Lamar Jackson into a back-to-back MVP and had this, and that. And it's so frustrating for this team. And if they end up hiring if they hire someone other than one of those two guys, I just don't know if I can actively support the team anymore. Like, it's been a situation where if they hire, like I said, if they hire Mike Vrabel, I'm out. If they hire McCarthy, I'm out. Like, it's one of those things where I'm just like throwing my hands up going like, guys, I can't. A report yesterday of all places came out about agents basically running the Chicago Bears. I know I've told you about Trey Armstrong, the agent who was the agent for Matt Eberflus, Ryan Poles, Matt Nagy, and this. And it's like, oh, Trace Armstrong is basically just the shadow president of the Bears, to the point where the commissioner of the league is looking into it. That's not a great sign. It's just so much.
It is. I mean, the good thing about this Bears team, though, is this head coaching decision really is like the final piece at this point. You know, the final big piece. Like, if the Bears organization gets this right, then the trajectory should become upwards towards the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
If they get it wrong, then it is just the same thing that's been happening in Chicago for 45 years.
Yeah. And there's still a lot of stuff that needs to happen. I'm still very confident that the Bears are going to end up hiring Ben Johnson. I think all the talk about him going to the Raiders is insane. I heard Danny Parkins of Breakfast Ball. He made a great point this week where it says, if Ben Johnson chooses the Raiders over the Bears, then good. I don't want him anyways, because there's a difference between being confident in your abilities and delusion. And picking the Raiders over the Bears is straight up delusional. And again, I have a Raiders family member. And it's one of those things of going like, let's compare the differences between these two teams. Let's talk about quarterback. The Bears have a young, elite-looking quarterback. The Raiders don't. They don't have a position to draft one, and if whoever they sign in free agency, they're going to have to pay either a ton of money to for uncertainty of being able to be elite. And then you look at you just look at the rest of their offense. Can anyone else name a wide receiver on that offense?
I mean, he's not a wide receiver, but he might as well be in Brock Bowers.
Yeah, but
that's like, really the only piece that they've got.
They have no running game. Their offensive line is okay. Like, it's not a good offensive line. It's not a bad offensive line. It's just okay. But yeah, you have Brock Bowers. That's pretty much it for your offense. You have no running back, so you're going to have to address that as well. On the defensive side of the ball, name me another player that's not named Max Crosby on that defense.
Right? Exactly.
As someone who does a lot more analytical work, I can name you a handful. You know, you got Malcolm Koonce. Granted, he's going to be a free agent. Christian Wilkins. They have Robert Spillane, who's there. Trevor, I can't even remember his last name, so I can't even count that. And, Tyree Wilson. But once you get to that point, you're going like, okay, like, who's this guy? Who's this guy? So the Bears have the 5th most cap space. The Raiders have the 3rd most. Like, I just continue to sit back and go, how can anyone view that Raiders job as better. Like, you're gonna have to go up against Patrick Mahomes twice a year, Justin Herbert twice a year. I'm gonna even throw Bo Nix into that mix twice a year with Sean Payton, Jim Harbaugh, Andy Reid twice a year. So that's 6 games of elite quarterbacks and elite coaches that you're going to have to go up to, opposed to when you go to the Bears division. Yeah, it's a great division, and you're going to have to go up against Dan Campbell twice a year. But granted, you take away Ben Johnson from that offense, what are the Lions offense truly going to look like? Matt LaFleur, I still don't think Jordan Love is that elite. I think in that playoff game we saw that he's not that truly elite level quarterback. He's still good. We don't know what Minnesota's going to look like next year. And I know a little bit later down this road we're going to talk about Sam Darnold and the cash that he ended up losing, but I look at that and go, it's a lot better of an option, and my God, it's going to be painful watching him sign with the Raiders.
No, and I mean, I agree. The Bears position is more desirable because there's more in place. Honestly, the only argument that could be made for the Raiders is if Tom Brady sways Ben Johnson to come over and be like, hey, look, you get to choose your quarterback, your running back, your receivers. You get to choose everything here. You go to Chicago, great. You're going to have a quarterback. You're going to have wide receivers. You're going to have a running back. But you have to find a way to make them work. They are not your guys. You are choosing to try and make it work with them. That would be, I think, the argument that Tom Brady is likely making to Ben Johnson to try and convince him to come to the Raiders instead. Full control, full selection. That's what you get with the Raiders. But the Bears is still more desirable because at least with the Bears, you look at it and go, okay, well, I've got all the guys here. If I can make them work, we can make playoff pushes now. I go to the Raiders, I have to somehow make this bland fucking potato salad desirable to the league and win games and make the playoffs with this shit team so that I don't get fired before the team I'm trying to build comes to fruition. That is the tough thing, you know?
Yeah, and speaking about, coaches being fired in with the Raiders, I saw it was like a Reddit post of where someone said, "Oh, this is my Raiders friend," and he said, "Here are the reasons why the Raiders job is more attractive." And one of the things that he posted was the Raiders are like, if Ben Johnson signs with the Raiders, he's going to be there long term and he's not going to have to worry about being fired. And I'm like, I'm sorry, sir, but you do realize that the Raiders have currently 3 different head coaches on their payroll and are going to be adding a 4th here, and they fired a coach the last 3 years in a row.
Yep.
Like, the Bears' record for head coaches isn't good, but it's not the Raiders' bad.
Might be desirable in terms of, oh, hey, I could get a payday, work for a year, and then I'm just the next guy paid for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
That's the thing with that Raiders job. Because, that's just it. The Raiders are going to be paying 4 top-level head coaches going into next season, while only one of them is on the sideline.
It's absurd. Like, again, that John Gruden contract was insane to begin with, where they gave him, $10 million per year for 10 seasons. Or it's like, like you guys do realize that 10 seasons, 10 years is a lot of time in the NFL, and he might not be there for all of it. And they're like, it's fine. And then Josh McDaniels was terrible, so they fired him. And then, I feel a little bit bad for Antonio Pierce because he never was really given that fair of a shot. But, I understand them moving on from him.
He was in the same position that if Ben Johnson takes that role, will be thrust into. Antonio Pierce was given a head coaching job with no team. It was like, here you go. But with Pierce, we don't look at him and go, well, he's an excellent player development guy. He's great at team building. Like, he can do this. We never talked about him in that way. He was very much he is a player's guy. Yeah. He can rally that locker room. He can pal around with the guys, basically be one of the guys.
Yep.
That was the draw of Pierce. Whoever goes in there next, you need to be able to build a team from scratch quickly, because the Davis family is not patient.
No.
They want playoffs. They're in Vegas. They want not just playoffs. They want home playoffs, because that's where the money is. Like, can you imagine what the ticket draw would be for a home playoff game in Las Vegas?
It's stupid.
That's exactly why the Davis family wanted to move there, was for that. They were like, man, the amount we can charge in Vegas compared to Oakland is 10 times on the low end. And
Yeah.
so that's why I think we've seen so much turnover in management and coaching within the organization, is because they're like, no, I want home playoff games. That's where the money is. Because a lot of these owners, Jerry Jones, the Davis family, that's the goal, is home playoffs. It's not championship. The championship's great. You know, it'll bring some awareness to the city, but you know, then we got to pay for a parade too. So that takes away from my profit. But ultimately, if we can get 2 home playoff games, that's enough to cover all my expenses for the season.
Yeah, well, even
Yeah.
one playoff game.
Right?
Yeah,
And so
you're
that
just
is
making free money at that point.
Yeah, and that's sort of what I feel like the goal is for this Vegas team. And I think they're a few years out. They got to get their draft right this year, no matter who their coach is. The intelligent thing would be to get a coach in before the draft so that you can be, as we've discussed, the Bears aren't able to do, you can get everybody on the same page and on the same development schedule.
Yeah.
Coach, quarterback, whatever else you bring in, everybody's on the same platform. You know, whereas Chicago doesn't like to do that. They prefer to go, well, yeah, we'll take this guy this year and that guy next year, because we don't want them to be able to communicate too much and, you know, overthrow our power.
Yeah, it's I hate the McCaskey family so much.
Yeah.
Like they still joke with the Rooney family where they're like, ha ha ha, you guys are an expansion team. It's like I hate this idea of the Bears ownership going like, oh, like look at all of this success we've had. You guys do realize all of that success came before the 70s? Like we've had one good thing happen after the 70s, but since then, like it's been now 60 years of just being a joke of an organization. You don't like, I'm pretty sure the Rooney family isn't too terribly upset about you calling them an expansion family when they cry into their 6 Super Bowl rings.
Right. And I mean, you mentioned hockey earlier, and it's the Chicago Bears are quickly descending into the realm of Toronto Maple Leafs, where it's, yeah, you look at our history, look at everything we did. And everybody goes, yeah, that's when there were only 6 teams, you guys.
Yep.
No competition. Great, you can win when there's 6 teams. What can you do when there's 30?
Yeah.
You know, like you won when you only had to win 1 playoff game to win the championship, not 4.
You know what's funny about the Toronto Maple Leafs is that they have never won 3 playoff series ever in their existence. I think that's hilarious. But again, like that's exactly what we're talking about here, is that like this Bears team, I love the history and having the charter franchise and this and that, but I sit back and I go, you know, I always say the NFL is a what have you done for me lately league. And it's basically, if you haven't done anything in the last 5 years, then you're irrelevant. Like again, we've talked about this Steelers team and going, you haven't won a playoff game in 8 years. Yeah, Mike Tomlin won a Super Bowl. That's great. That was what, 2007, 2008. Ever since then,
what has he done? You want to go even more recent and more successful? The New England Patriots.
Yeah,
phenomenal dynasty. Tom Brady won them multiple Super Bowls. All this. What have you done for me lately? Since he left, you guys have done nothing, and they've gone right back into that realm of mediocrity and disappointment that they were in before Tom Brady was handed the reins in a random game on an injury and going, oh, well, I guess this is what we got. And all of a sudden you have
a dynasty. Yeah.
Right. And so.
And speaking of the Patriots, because if we keep talking about both of our teams giving us nothing but clinical depression, I think this might end in a lot darker of a note. But speaking of the Patriots, again, they fired Gerard Mayo after a win. They don't have the number 1 pick. They hire Mike Vrabel almost instantly. Like, I think everyone in the league knew the second that Gerard Mayo was fired that Mike Vrabel was getting that job. And I think having the Rooney Rule in today's NFL, I don't think it's beneficial anymore. And if you don't know what the Rooney Rule is, it means you have to interview two minority coaches in building, so face to face, before you can make a decision on your general manager and your head coach. These are things that you have to do to be compliant for the Rooney Rule. And there's been teams these last few years that have basically just looked at candidates and said, we're basically not going to hire you, but since you're a minority, we have to interview you to get compliant, because they did 2 interviews basically the second day of the season, the regular season being over, where it was Brian Leftwich and another minority coach. I don't remember who it was, but it was basically just like, oh, we've interviewed both of these guys in person, and like we're gonna interview Mike Vrabel next. And it's like, oh, so you basically just said to these guys that you are giving them interviews, and then you're never gonna talk to them again. And then after one interview with Mike Vrabel, you give them the job. I still feel like that's kind of a really scummy thing to do. And I think having a system of where you hire, or where you should be forced to talk to people of different skin complexion to ours, or a different gender of ours, is an important thing to have happen, because the NFL for a long time was at the top level of the GMs and the coaches, it's a white boy club. It was. It's changed now because of the Rooney Rule, and it's a very good thing to have happen. But I think in certain applications like that, we saw the same thing happen and play out with the Raiders when they hired John Gruden a few years ago. It's one of those things, like every couple of years we just see a team where it's like what's the point of even having those interviews if we already know who that team is going to hire? And it just feels wrong for those candidates.
It does. It's unfortunate, because it feels like it's a forced issue in some of those situations. Because you have situations sometimes where it's like, we know the guy we want. Like, we haven't even interviewed him or anybody else. He is the guy we want, just from having passing conversations. But we have to interview these other guys. I mean, the thing with this one with the Patriots, I will respect the fact that, with them including Byron Leftwich in there, I think that's a route they went, where they were like, look, we're going to interview you for the head coaching job, but we're also going to sort of side interview for the offensive coordinator job.
Yeah.
Like we're not necessarily going to be giving you the job. We've got an idea in mind of what we want. We have to interview you, but we're going to expedite the process by bringing you in and double interviewing you, essentially. We want Vrabel, but we want you too. And so doing it like that,
it doubles up as like a
still
fact-finding mission.
Exactly. And you're not skirting the rule. You're still doing what's best for your team. So the Rooney Rule was good when it was first implemented, but a lot of teams have started to find the loopholes and the ways to just get around the process, and that's one of them, unfortunately. I don't myself see a perfect solution to remedy that. Unfortunately, it is the way it is, and until we start seeing less 90-year-old white slave owners running these teams, we're probably not going to get a whole lot of diversity actually coming into the league. What if we can get 3 or 4 of these teams actually owned by peoples of color, then we might start seeing some changes. But until then, it's going to be just these owners and management groups trying to find ways around the rules. The Patriots, in this situation, I don't think they've done wrong. I think
they've done everything by the books. It just feels wrong to me that they've basically just been like, we're going to interview these 2 guys, and then we're going to give the job to Mike Vrabel.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you could say the same thing about your Chicago Bears. It's been like a year and a half of them going, Ben Johnson's our guy. We don't even want to interview anybody else, but you're going to have to. And so
we're interviewing everyone under the sun. We're going to have a total of 20 head coaching interviews. Like,
yeah,
we've already completed 13.
The opposite direction of what the Patriots did. The Patriots just did the bare minimum, whereas the Bears are like, we're going to just bring everybody in and interview everybody and choose the same guy that we were planning to before we interviewed anybody else anyway.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. It's just opposite ends of the spectrum. We'll bring in 2 guys just to barely fill that role. Whereas the Bears are like, we'll just bring in everybody. That way there's no questions about if we left anybody out.
Yeah. And so far, the Bears have only been interviewed face to face with one minority head coach, and that was Ron Rivera, who I completely forgot fell under that rule.
Yep.
And we still have to interview another person of color or minority for this role before we can even hire someone. But yeah, it's just one of those things. I don't blame the Patriots for doing that. They identified the guy that they wanted, and they were quickly going after it. And I think the NFL has massively slowed down this head coaching hiring process with you're only allowed to do a Zoom interview or like a virtual interview first if they're still employed by a team, and then you're not allowed to do an in-person interview with some of these guys until they're either out of the playoffs or until January 20th. And then if the team makes it to the Super Bowl, you can't hire a coach until February 10th. And you look at it and go, well, when's the Senior Bowl? The Senior Bowl is the same week as the Pro Bowl. You would love to have your head coach in place for your team going into the Senior Bowl process. And the Patriots just said, we are going to get everyone hired. We're going to make sure that we have the top bid at some of the offensive coordinators that we want and some of the DCs that we want. And then we are going to basically get put in place of going, like, we're going to look at the entire team. Like, the Patriots are doing something right in this instance of going, we are getting everything set so that we can have the most amount of time possible to get everything prepared for when we go into the draft and free agency process. And I do kind of like, I understand why the NFL put in place of like, we're going to slow it down because we want coaches to be focused on their roles. We don't want them flying to 3 different cities in the week of where like, oh, we're playing the divisional matchup. Like for Ben Johnson, it would be a really shitty thing if he had to fly to Chicago and then he had to fly to Vegas and then he had to fly to Jacksonville all in the week when he should be preparing. It's just one of those things where like it's a good system that they have in place, but it's also incredibly annoying for fans and front offices for guys where it's like, we want to interview that guy because he's the top candidate. Can we interview him? No, you have to wait. Shit. This is taking time.
Right. Yeah, and I get that. It's frustrating, but that's just it. It's if you want the best, you got to wait till they're no longer in the run for the championship, which is the way it should be.
Yeah, I agree.
I just maybe there's a way to reestablish even ground and just make it so there's no interviewing and no hiring and no tampering
until
the Monday after the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But as you said, the Senior Bowl is that same weekend usually, and so
it would then have to start to push everything pushed back by that point, where you would have to move the Senior Bowl back and East-West Shrine Bowl back, and you'd have to move the Combine back and the draft back, which I don't necessarily think would be the worst decision in the world. But...
I don't think you'd have to move the Combine or the draft back, because those still occur several weeks after the Super Bowl. The Senior Bowl, yes. I mean, that might be a situation where the teams need to start looking at hiring better scouting staff. Being like, okay, well, our coaches aren't at the Senior Bowl, but all our scouting staff is, and they are going to relay all this information to whoever we hire and whoever we have. And you just make it so that it's a blanket rule where it's like, okay, well, you know, these teams can't choose their coaches yet, so their head coach can't be at the Senior Bowl. So Andy Reid, Kyle Shanahan, you guys aren't allowed to attend the Senior Bowl either.
Yeah.
You have to send representatives.
Yeah.
You know,
the only problem with that is that there's
ways
teams
to even the ground that in that manner, because you know I'm completely in agreement. You know, there's been years where people have talked about, oh, we want to interview Mike Tomlin to take him from the Steelers, and it's like, yeah, but he's playing playoffs this week, so I don't want him going out for an interview. You know, you'd be the same if you had Ben Johnson and some other team wanted to interview him, you'd be like, yeah, no, you wait until we win the Super Bowl, motherfucker.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, I don't blame the league. It's one of those things where I think the league over this time, they're going to have to get things situated and sorted a little bit more. But last thing we talk about here today is the absolute collapse of Sam Darnold and him losing millions and millions of dollars over these last 2 weeks. Because again, when he went up against the Lions in the final week of the season, that was for the number 1 seed. And it's like, okay, if you win this, you have the number 1 seed, you get the bye week. And at that point, like, Sam Darnold has had an unbelievable year. Like, I'm not going to say he was going to make $60 million a season from a team. $45 million without a doubt. Like, there was going to be a team, whether that was Minnesota or other, that was happily going to pay him that. And that Lions game where he was seeing the ghost of Aiden Hutchinson out there and he just looked terrible, missing a ton of throws. It's like, okay, like, he definitely lost some money from this game, but is it enough that we're all going to be sitting back really talking about it? And then he goes into that playoff game against the Rams and it was like, okay, you lost $1 million on that throw. You lost $1 million off of this throw. And I look at Sam Darnold now and it's going like, and this is all in retrospective because he's still probably going to be paid like $20 million a season by a team. And I think both of us would love to be paid $20 million a year to be shitty at playing quarterback. Like, I think we would both jump at that in a heartbeat and go like, oh yeah, like, boo-hoo, poor us. But it's one of those things of going like, dude, you just lost like $20 million of capital gain from these 2 weeks of how bad you've played.
See, I don't think he lost that much, if I'm being honest. Like, I think leading up to that Lions week, I was seeing him get in that $45 to $55 million contract. I think after the way those last 2 weeks went, I mean, let's be real. You're playing against one of the best 2 teams in the league, in the Lions.
Yep.
And then you've got a playoff game against an emotionally driven Rams team who weren't allowed to play at home because their city was burning to the ground with one of the best 3 head coaches in the league. And
Yep.
Kevin O'Connell's doing a good job, but
he's going to win
at
Coach
that
of the
level.
Year.
And so I look at that and I go, okay, well, I don't put that all on Sam Darnold. Did he make some bad throws? Yes. But we've seen every quarterback make bad throws. I just think the microscope is on him so much more because of how bad we expected the Lions to be. And so then when they start playing a little bit bad, we go, oh, there they are. That's it. That's what we thought.
Yeah.
And it's all Darnold's fault. I think he's still likely to get in that $35 to $45 million range. I think he's still going to get that Daniel Jones level contract, maybe even from the Daniel Jones former team. You never know. I think he'll still get that deal, though. I don't put it all on him. Yes, he was seeing some of those ghosts, but look at how much he progressed after being under Kyle Shanahan and then
Kevin O'Connell
for a bit. I wouldn't be shocked to see the Vikings still bring him back because remember, we talked about this Vikings team from the start of the season not having a lot of great talent in place. Best wide receiver in football, Justin Jefferson.
Yep. Jordan Addison is an unbelievable number 2.
They put some good pieces around, but at no point were we talking about the Vikings being maybe the best team in the
we were talking
NFC
about them
North
being
even,
the
let
4th
alone
team
the
in the
NFC.
NFC North.
Right?
Yeah.
We were expecting them to be 3rd or 4th, battling it out with probably the Bears for that last place position. And it just, everything fell perfectly for them this year. I don't put that all on Darnold myself. Yes, he didn't look good in the playoff game, but
yeah,
it happens.
Would you be comfortable with the Steelers giving him $45 million?
Only if we hire a new OC that is quarterback centric and not run game centric. That's still the issue there is, for the Steelers, it's still you need to have the coaching in place to develop a quarterback. Darnold is mostly developed, but you need a guy that's going to be able to, like Kevin O'Connell all year, able to keep him grounded and focused. And it was just those 2 big games where things fell apart on them, which I'm still not surprised by that because we were expecting that to happen to the Vikings as early as week 10. We kept, this is the week they're going to start stumbling, and they never did, because they just had a great coaching tandem of Kevin O'Connell and we were talking about him earlier, defense.
Oh, Brian Flores.
Yeah, Brian Flores. Like you had a good pairing there of coaching. And I think that was what really helped this team elevate. And Sam Darnold was coming into his own. We can't forget he was a top tier pick at one time by the New York Jets. The New York Jets are, we talk about teams not being able to develop quarterbacks. That's one. If anything, they ball quarterback in New York. You know, they take a quarterback and they go, "You are really good at throwing the ball. Let's see how much we can make you cry." You know, that's sort of what it is to get drafted by the Jets as a quarterback, or even sign with the Jets. Look at Aaron Rodgers. You know, he looks like he aged 15 years.
It looks like he went through a presidency.
And now. And it's only been 2 years.
Yeah. It looks like he went through a full-blown presidency with the New York Jets over that time.
So, I mean, back to that original question, I would not mind Sam Darnold coming to the Pittsburgh Steelers as long as it was alongside a coach that is there with the express purpose of developing and maintaining quarterback.
Yeah, it's someone who can develop the quarterback and can have a balanced offense of both a really good run game and a really balanced passing game.
I mean, we Arthur Smith can call a good run game. He can't develop a quarterback. He doesn't have a
consistent passing game.
Right? And so it's that's what it comes down to. Now, no matter what quarterback you throw at me, it's going to be, is Arthur Smith
calling the plays? Yeah.
Right? And if Arthur Smith is calling the plays, then I don't want a quarterback that's going to, at that point, I want Kirk Cousins or Russell Wilson. Because at least those two guys, they know how to pitch the ball, because that's what it's going to be. But I saw a good interview with, it wasn't even an interview, Ben Roethlisberger's podcast this week. And he was talking about, everybody talked about Russell Wilson and how when he came in, it looked like a different offense because he's going up there with the play and he's audibling, he's doing checks, he's, changing the protections and all this. And it looked good at first, but as Ben Roethlisberger pointed out, it started being every play. Every time Russell Wilson came out, he was checking, he was audibling, he was moving things around every single time. And even Roethlisberger was like, after 10 years being a quarterback with the same offense, I knew it inside and out, so I could do that, but I still wasn't. There were times where I saw a bad protection and I would change it, sure, but I wasn't changing every single play. When you're changing every single play, then it becomes a question of, are you just not confident as a quarterback, or is the play calling bad? And so that is what they got to figure out here. I think the situation this year it wasn't bad quarterback play, it was aging quarterback play. He should not have needed to go out there and do that many checks, that many audibles. I think the issue was he was going out there and going, I really don't trust this play call. I really don't trust this play caller. And so I need to move guys around just so I can see what the defense is because I don't think he knows what the defense is. And so that is what I think we were seeing. And, I think Roethlisberger hit the nail on the head of this team needs to figure out was Russell Wilson doing that because he wasn't confident? Or was he doing that because the play calling was bad?
Yeah.
And that needs to be the first thing that the Steelers address before we even talk about who are we re-signing on defense? Who are we drafting? Like any of that. They need to figure that out going forward. And that's why for me, who we have as a quarterback next year at this point doesn't matter at all.
Nope.
Much like it did last year. I said the same thing last year. I was like, it doesn't matter to me if it's Kenny Pickett, Mitchell Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson. I think I listed a bunch of other guys because free agents, Kirk Cousins was one of them.
Yep.
It didn't matter to me then. It doesn't matter to me now. Until I see what management, coaching, and ownership is going to do, it doesn't matter what happens below that until those are all sorted.
I totally agree. But that's it for us here today, unless you have anything else that you'd like to bring up. Thank you all very much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe and comment on anything you would like us to potentially talk about in future podcasts. But for Sterling, I'm Brendan, saying peace.